There is a silent block that prevents most people from becoming wealthy. And the most dangerous part is that it doesn't look like a problem. It feels normal. It even feels intelligent. But in reality, it is the biggest invisible limitation in your life. Andrew Carnegie understood this like few others. He didn't believe people failed because of a lack of opportunity, nor because of a lack of intelligence, nor because of a lack of effort. They failed because they thought the wrong way. And this is the real mental block, a way of thinking that keeps you stuck, even when you're trying to move forward. Because wealth doesn't start with money. It starts in the mind. And if your mind is conditioned for scarcity, it doesn't matter how much you earn, you will always stall. Now pay attention to this because it can completely change the way you see everything. Your problem is not a lack of ability. It's an excess of internal limitation. You were taught throughout your life to play small, to not take risks, to not expose yourself, to not make mistakes. And that feels like protection. But it's a prison. Because everything that builds wealth requires the exact opposite. It requires risk. It requires exposure. It requires decision. It requires action. And when your mind rejects that, you sabotage yourself without realizing it. You start projects and don't finish them. You have ideas and don't execute them. You see opportunities and don't take them. And then you say it wasn't the right time. But in reality, it was fear, disguised as logic. Carnegie knew that the biggest obstacle wasn't external. It was internal. It was the fear of losing, the fear of failing, the fear of being judged. And this fear creates a dangerous pattern. You always choose what is safe, what is comfortable, what is familiar, even knowing that it won't take you where you want to go. And here is a truth few people accept. Excessive safety is the enemy of wealth, because growth is outside the comfort zone. Always. But the mental block makes you rationalize this. It makes you justify why it's not the right time yet, why you need more preparation, more knowledge, more certainty. And while you wait, other people less prepared than you are doing it, making mistakes, learning, and growing, because they are not trapped in the same block. Now think about this honestly. How many times have you delayed something important because you weren't ready? How many opportunities did you miss because you overanalyzed? How many ideas did you abandon before even trying for real? This is not coincidence. It's a pattern. And patterns are what build results, or destroy them. Carnegie understood that wealth requires a radical shift in mindset. You need to stop avoiding mistakes and start using mistakes as a tool. Because those who avoid mistakes avoid action. And those who avoid action build nothing. Simple as that. But the mental block makes you believe you need to get it right the first time. That you need to be perfect. That you need guarantees. And that doesn't exist. It never has. No one builds wealth with certainty. It's built through attempts, adjustment, persistence, and repetition. Now there is a point that completely separates those who grow from those who stay stuck. Decision. Block people think too much and decide too little. People who grow decide and adjust along the way. And that changes everything. Because decision creates movement, and movement creates opportunity. But while you are trapped in the block, you keep analyzing, calculating, waiting, and time passes. And here's something direct. The mental block doesn't stop you from dreaming. It stops you from executing. And without execution, any dream becomes accumulated frustration. Now look at your reality today. No excuses. No filters. It is a direct reflection of how you think, of the decisions you make, or avoid making. And that can be uncomfortable. But it is also liberating. Because if the problem is in the way you think, the solution is too. You can change, but not just by changing what you do, by changing what you accept. You need to stop accepting fear as justification. Stop accepting doubt as direction. Stop accepting comfort as strategy. And start acting even with uncertainty, even with fear, even without guarantees. Because that's how the block breaks. not by waiting for it to disappear, but by acting despite it. And in the beginning, it will feel strange, uncomfortable, insecure. But that's exactly how you know you're on the right path. Because growth does not feel comfortable. Ever. Carnegie built wealth understanding that the mind must be trained to advance, not to constantly protect itself. And that requires practice. Daily. Consistent. You don't change your mindset in a moment. You change it by repeating new behaviors until the new becomes the standard and the old loses strength. Now, there is a question you need to answer honestly. Do you want to stay safe or do you want to grow? Because most of the time, you can't have both at once. And that is the choice that defines everything. And in the end, the mental block only continues to exist for one reason. You are still obeying it. But the moment you decide to act differently, even if small, even if imperfect, you begin to break it. And each action breaks it a little more, until what once held you back loses its power, and you gain freedom. But this doesn't happen on its own. It depends on you. It depends on your decision to no longer accept living limited by something that exists only in your mind. So from this point on, don't wait to feel ready. Don't wait to lose the fear. Don't wait to be certain. That's not going to happen. Act anyway. Because that's how you break free from the block. That's how you begin to build real wealth. From the inside out. And when you understand this in practice, you'll realize that the biggest limitation was never the outside world. It was always what was happening inside you. And the moment you change that, nothing can hold you back anymore. And when that block begins to weaken, something interesting happens. You start to see opportunities that were always there. But before, you couldn't see them. Not because they didn't exist, but because your mind wasn't prepared to recognize them. That changes everything. Because the game stops being about lack of opportunity and becomes about the ability to perceive and act. And here's a point Carnegie deeply understood. Wealth is not luck. It is perception plus decision plus action. But the mental block breaks exactly this sequence. You even perceive, but you don't decide. Or you decide, but you don't act. And then nothing happens. Now think about this directly. How many times have you had a good idea and did nothing with it? How many times did you feel you could do something bigger, but went back to your old pattern? How many times did you start excited and stop at the first obstacle? This is not a lack of discipline. It's the block protecting you from discomfort. And the problem is that it protects you so much that it prevents you from growing. Because growth and discomfort go together. Always. And when you understand this, you stop running from discomfort and start using it as a signal. If it feels uncomfortable, you're probably on the right path. Now, there's a mental shift that completely changes the game. You need to stop seeing difficulty as a problem and start seeing it as part of the process. Because as long as you treat difficulty as something wrong, you will always retreat. But when you understand that difficulty is the path, you move forward anyway. Carnegie didn't avoid problems. He sought to solve them. Because he knew that every problem solved increased his value. And here's something almost no one applies. The market does not reward effort. It rewards solutions. You can work hard, but if you're not solving relevant problems, you don't grow. And the mental block makes you focus on safe tasks instead of important problems. Because important problems require exposure. They require responsibility. They require risk. And that's scary. But that's exactly where growth is. Now think clearly. Are you spending your time solving real problems? Or just staying busy? Because there's a huge difference. And that difference defines your results. Block people fill their day. People who grow build value. And value requires focus. It requires prioritization. It requires saying no to almost everything. So you can say yes to what truly matters. But that hurts. Because it means giving up comfort. Giving up distractions. Giving up immediate validation. And the block tries to avoid that pain. But in the long run, that protection costs much more. It costs growth. It costs freedom. It costs potential. Now there's a shift you need to make. Stop measuring your actions by how comfortable they are, and start measuring them by how relevant they are. This completely changes your routine, because you stop choosing what's easy and start choosing what matters, even if it's hard. And that, repeated over time, builds something most people never achieve. But there's one more critical point. Environment. You don't build a strong mindset in a weak environment. If you're surrounded by people who think small, who avoid risk, who justify mediocrity, that influences you, even if you don't realize it. Carnegie surrounded himself with people who thought big, who executed, who pursued growth, because he knew mindset is contagious. So pay attention to this. Are the people around you pulling you up or keeping you in the same place? Because often, the block isn't just internal. It's reinforced externally. And if you don't adjust that, you'll be fighting something that is being fed every single day. Now, at the end of all this, there is a simple truth. The mental block only remains strong while you keep obeying it. The moment you start acting differently, it begins to lose its power. And not all at once. Gradually. In the first difficult decision. In the first uncomfortable action. In the first time you act even without wanting to. And then again, and again, until what once seemed impossible becomes natural. And that's the point where everything changes. Because you stop being someone limited by fear and become someone guided by decision. And this doesn't just affect money. It affects your entire life, your confidence, your posture, your way of thinking, your way of acting, and most importantly, your results. So from here on, there's a silent choice happening inside you. Stay protected and limited, or expose yourself and grow. There's no right answer, but there is a consequence for each choice. And in the end, what defines your wealth is not what you know. It's not what you want. It's what you do with what you know, even when you're afraid. And that starts with a simple decision. Stop obeying the block and start acting despite it. Because that's how you unlock yourself. That's how you evolve. That's how you build something real. And that's how you stop being someone who could have and become someone who did. And when you cross that point, there's no going back. Because you start to realize something that completely changes your relationship with money, with work, and with yourself. The game was never external. It was always internal. You begin to see that what once seemed like a lack of opportunity was actually a lack of positioning. You weren't being held back. You were limiting yourself. And that's not comfortable to accept. But it's extremely powerful. Because the moment you accept this, you regain control. And control changes everything. Now you stop waiting for things to get better and start improving the way you act. And that creates a silent but profound shift. You stop being reactive and start being intentional. Before, you reacted to what happened. Now you create what needs to happen. And that is rare, very rare, because most people live on autopilot. They wake up, react, get distracted, stay busy, and repeat, without clear direction, without firm decisions, without real construction. And in the middle of all this, the mental block keeps operating, not as something visible, but as an invisible pattern that dictates your choices. And that's why many people spend years busy, but don't evolve, because they are always moving, but never in the right direction. Now, there is a question you need to face with brutal honesty. Are you building something, or just staying busy? Because these two things look the same, but they are completely different. Building requires intention. It requires focus. It requires discomfort. Staying busy only requires habit and distraction. And the mental block prefers exactly that, to keep you busy with what doesn't matter. So you don't face what truly matters. Because what truly matters requires responsibility. And responsibility is heavy, but it also sets you free. Now think about this deeply. If you were moved today everything that doesn't generate results in your life, what would remain? Very little. But that very little is exactly what can change everything. The problem is that you dilute it in the middle of distractions. And then you lose strength, lose focus, lose results. Carnegie understood that wealth doesn't come from doing many things. It comes from doing a few things extremely well and repeatedly. But for that, you need to let go. Let go of excess. Let go of false urgencies. Let go of distractions that seem harmless, but are draining your life. And here's a point few people have the courage to face. You are not tired because you do too much. You are tired because you do what doesn't matter. That wears you down. That frustrates you. That traps you. Because you spend energy, but see no results. And that kills motivation. But when you start directing your energy to what truly matters, something changes. The fatigue remains, but now it makes sense. Now it builds. Now it generates return. And that strengthens you. Now, there's another block connected to all of this. The need for validation. You want to do something, but you think about what others will think. You want to try something new, but you imagine judgment. You want to grow, but you fear stepping outside the norm. And that holds you back, because you start living based on others' expectations, not your own decisions. Carnegie didn't build wealth trying to please others. He built it by executing, even when criticized, even when misunderstood, because he knew if you need approval to act, you will never act at the level required. So you need to decide, do you want approval or do you want results? Because often you can't have both. And while you choose approval, you limit your growth. Now, there is a final shift that completely separates those who build wealth from those who only wish for it. Radical responsibility. No excuses. No justifications. No shifting blame. You take ownership of everything. If it went wrong, it was you. If you didn't move forward, it was you. If you didn't do it, it was you. And that may sound harsh, but it is liberating. Because if it was you, then it can also be you who changes it. And then everything goes back into your hands. Now you don't depend on circumstances. You don't depend on luck. You don't depend on anyone. You depend on your action. And that completely changes the game. Because now there is no more waiting. There is execution. There is no more one day. There is today. There is no more when I'm ready. There is start anyway. And when you enter this state, the block loses power. Because it cannot resist constant action. It only exists while you stop, while you hesitate, while you delay. But when you move, even with fear, even without certainty, it weakens until it disappears. And then you realize something that once seemed impossible. You were never stuck. You were just stopped. And there is a huge difference between those two things. Being stuck feels like something outside your control. Being stopped is a choice, even if unconscious. And the moment you turn that into awareness, you can change. No, without needing anything else, without waiting for anything else, without depending on anything else. Just decision, action, repetition, and building. And in the end, when you look at all of this, it becomes clear. Wealth was never about money. It was about who you become in the process. It was about how you think, how you decide, how you act. And when that changes, the result comes as a consequence, inevitable. So don't wait for more clarity. Don't wait for more courage. Don't wait for more confidence. All that comes after. What comes first is the decision and the action, even if imperfect, even if small, but real. Because that's what builds. That's what transforms. That's what breaks the block. And that's what, in the end, puts you in a place most people never reach. Not because of lack of ability, but because of lack of decision. And now the final question is not about money. It's about you. Will you continue being the person who thinks, analyzes, and delays? Or will you become the person who decides, acts, and builds? Because that choice, you make it every day, in silence, and in the end, it defines everything. And even after understanding all of this, there is one final level that almost no one reaches. Not because it's complex, but because it requires something most people avoid at all costs. Consistency without emotion. Here, the game completely changes. At first, you rely on energy, on motivation, on momentum. But if you continue like that, you will always fluctuate. You'll have good days and unproductive days. You'll move forward and then stall. And that keeps you stuck in the same cycle, just at another level. Now, when you enter this final stage, you stop depending on how you feel and start depending on what is defined. You don't wake up asking, "What do I feel like doing today?" You already know. It's decided. It's clear. And it simply gets done. No room for negotiation. No room for doubt. No room for distraction. And that creates something extremely powerful. Predictability. And predictability generates results. Because when you know you will execute, regardless of your mood, the weather, the situation, you eliminate the biggest risk that exists, yourself. Most people don't fail because of external factors. They fail because of internal inconsistency. And that's exactly what this level solves. Now, there's a technical adjustment Carnegie applied, even without using modern terms. He eliminated friction. Everything that made action harder, he simplified. Everything that created distraction, he removed. Everything that didn't contribute, he cut. Because he understood something few people take seriously. The harder it is to start, the less you do. The easier it is to execute, the more you repeat. And repetition builds results. So look at your routine practically. Does it make action easier or harder? Do you have to think too much to start? Do you need to decide all the time what to do? Do you have to fight distractions constantly? If yes, you don't have a discipline problem. You have a structure problem. And until you fix that, you will keep relying on willpower. And willpower fails. Always. Now, when you structure your environment, when you define things clearly, when you reduce decisions, execution becomes natural. And that's when the mental block practically disappears. Because it doesn't survive in a structured environment. It lives in chaos, in doubt, in indecision, in distraction. But when everything is clear, it loses space. Now, there's another factor that separates those who truly build wealth. Deep focus time. It's not about working more hours. It's about working with more intensity on what matters. Most people live fragmented. They do a little of everything. They interrupt themselves constantly. They get distracted all the time. And that destroys any possibility of real growth. Because meaningful results require depth. They require sustained concentration. They require full presence. And that is rare today. Very rare. But exactly because of that, it is extremely valuable. If you learn to truly focus, without interruption, without distraction, even for a short time each day, you are already ahead of most people. Now connect this with everything you've understood. Without the block, with decision, with action, with consistency, with focus, it becomes impossible not to move forward. Impossible. It may not happen in the time you want. It may not happen in the way you imagine. But the result comes because the process is correct. And a correct process generates inevitable results. Now, there's one last trap you need to avoid. Wanting results too quickly. It seems positive, but it can sabotage you. Because you start measuring everything in the short term. And when results don't appear, you slow down, change strategies, doubt the process, and go back to the beginning. But those who truly build think differently. They understand that results take time, but execution doesn't. Execution is daily, immediate, constant, so they focus on what they can control. Today's action, today's decision, today's execution. and they let results come as a consequence, without anxiety, without desperation, without rushing, but also without stopping. And that creates a compounding effect that, at first, is invisible, but later becomes impossible to ignore. Now, at the final point of all this, there is no more theory, no more concepts, only practice. Because you already know. You already understand. You've already seen where the mistake is. You already know what needs to be done. So don't turn this into just another piece of content consumed. Turn it into action. No, not later. Because the mental block is not broken by thinking about it. It is broken by acting despite it. And every action you execute is a step away from your old pattern and a step toward who you want to become. And in the end, this is what defines everything. Not what you know, not what you want, but what you do, repeatedly. So get up, choose something that truly matters, and do it. No adjustments, no waiting, no excuses, and then do it again, and again, and again, because that's how you build. That's how you grow. That's how you break the block. And that's how you reach a place most people never do. Not because of lack of opportunity, but because of lack of action. And now that can no longer be your case, because you already know exactly what is at stake and what needs to be done. Now it's up to you.